So in this video, I want to talk to you about the third level of positioning how to create wealth. And this is the part 3 of the multi-part series. I have created 2 parts before this, and this is the third one. So if you haven't watched the first 2 parts on positioning, how to position yourself to create wealth, I highly recommend watching the first 2 parts first, and then you watch this one so you have a full picture of what I'm talking about so that you can benefit in the best way possible. So we're going to talk about the third level of positioning, the third layer of positioning when it comes to creating wealth. And this third layer is your business model. So once you've started your company, you are the major shareholder, and you've positioned that company in a profitable industry, high growth, which has big profit margins. The third step is to identify the right business model. How is the money actually going to flow into the company? What is the mechanism that you're going to use to flow this money into your company? And ultimately, you will own most of this company. So you got to make sure you identify how this process happens, and that's the business model. What is the value proposition with the market, etc. So let's look at the business model. Fundamentally, in various places, various education systems, the business model is around making sales, right? The first step of any business, once you have developed goods and services, is to find clients. And when the clients pay you money, you have sales, and the profit comes from sales. So actually the most important thing is the sales, the revenue. I used to think profit is the most important thing, but actually the revenue is the most important thing, because profit is derived from the revenue. So at the top, if you read an income statement of a business, at the top is the revenue, then you've got the expenses, and then you've got the profit, right? You know that. So how did that revenue come about? What was the process behind securing that revenue? Because that's the first thing that the business needs to perform on. It has to generate revenue and then pay the expenses and have whatever is left over. So typically this process of generating revenue from a business from scratch is a very tedious and lengthy process. Let's take healthcare business for example, and I'm going to give you a couple of case studies to understand this, and make sure you stick till the end of the video to get the full picture. Okay, so when a healthcare business starts, it's a profitable industry, but you got to secure the licenses, which is very tough to get. You got to secure a facility. You got to identify the right location. You got to identify right types of services that you want to be offering. What are the services that are selling in the market? And you have to hire staff. You have to engage into marketing efforts, because nobody knows who you are. Like overnight, you decided to start a company, but nobody really knows who you are. So you got to build all the social media pages, social media profiles, and you have to create this image, and you have to get the word out. To get the word out, it costs money. To hire employees, that's a recurring cost. To get the facility, that's a recurring cost. And you don't know, even after spending this money, whether you're going to make money or not. That's the truth of it. And this is one of the reasons why people fear getting into business, is because of the high risk at the beginning. It is tremendously high risk, and you putting your own capital. Even if you raise capital, there is nothing there. And you're working day and night and nothing is being produced. And so to secure license, to have the facility in order to hire staff, to develop a strategy, to develop services, to hire doctors and all of this, it costs a lot of money. And even if you are successful in setting up this business and making money, well, even if you make money, it's not going to be a lot at the beginning. almost always you will have to, whatever, even if you make a profit, almost always you have to re-inject into the business. So you don't get to keep the profit. Maybe you can pay some of your expenses, but you have to keep pushing this money back into the system and making it grow. And sometimes this money that you push into the system comes back to you more, and sometimes it doesn't come back and nothing happens. And that's the very painful process of developing a business, of creating a business from scratch, of generating this revenue and increasing the revenue. Revenues typically get increased when you engage in marketing and sales effort, and that costs time and money. And even if someone else is doing the sales, you've got to pay them, so it costs money. So that's the process. I met a 60-year-old man, very successful healthcare business owner. He owned a $3.5 million business. It took him 17 years to create that business. And at the end of that cycle, he had a $3.5 million business. He has a couple of houses. He drove a Rolls, and he wore a nice couple of $100,000 watch. But he was 60 years old, and he had spent 17 years of his life doing it. And I came into the door and I offered him a price to buy his company, and we came to an agreement on the price and the terms. And I was like, wow, I'm 29 years old and this guy is 60 years old, and he has spent his whole life creating this business, and I'm coming here and I could raise the money from the banks in 8 months, 6 to 8 months, and I could own this business and just run the business and pay off the debt, because the revenue and profit is already there and it's stable. Because this is not a business that came yesterday. This is a business that was established 17 years ago. And I noticed it and he noticed it. And he said to me, I wish I did what you do, and and he said, I have a regret that my whole life I stayed in this little clinic and I didn't do something really big. And I'm at a point in my life where I'm able to take risk and I want to play big. And I want to be associated with your company in some manner. And how did you get these high profile individuals together on your team? This is just absolutely incredible. And if I had this team, I could raise capital, I could do so many things. I have already the contacts with the royal family members. They are my patients. And we were having this discussion and I was like, this is incredible. He created something over 17 years and developed this value that a lot of the people cannot even do that in 17 years, because most of them will be wiped out in the first 2 years. They'll run out of money. But he actually discovered the right business model and he kept working at it. And he's created this value, and I could just raise money and just buy this thing, and I could do it again, over and over again. Like, that is just absolutely amazing. I mean, that's the recipe for creating wealth. And I started to study all the people that did it. BlackRock, one of the largest private equity firms, that's what they do. They buy businesses. KKR is also one of the largest asset management companies. They also buy companies using debt. You've got Blackstone as well. I mean, just watch what these guys do. They just go in and they buy companies that were created over 10, 20, 30, 40 years of time. And they are profitable from day one when they acquire a company, because they're acquiring profitable companies. So you could either take the pathway, and we are talking about fundamental principles in terms of the business model. We haven't gotten into the detail, but fundamentally you could either create revenue from scratch and do everything on your own. It's kind of like building a house and buying a house, right? Which has everything that you like and it's already there. You just write a check and you buy the house, or you create something from scratch. I mean, so you can fundamentally decide whether you want to whether you want to create revenue from scratch or buy revenue. And most of the business models out there in the market are deal with creating revenue, making sales, developing goods and services and products, and hiring teams, and taking a facility, an office space, paying rent, paying for the employees. And you calculate all the costs and you're like, oh my goodness, I don't have this money, so I need to go to an investor. And then you land up in Shark Tank or in front of some private equity firm, and they say that, okay, we'll give you the money, but we want 70% of the company, 80% of the company, 50% of the company. And suddenly you're no longer the major shareholder. And then you work some more, you generate revenue, and then, you need more money to expand faster, and they give you more, and then you lose more equity. And before you know it, the business model is ready, the business is making money, but now you are at 10%, 15%. And then that's when they write you a check and they send you off into the desert. But that's the whole process of creating revenue. And you could take the approach of putting your own money and risking that. So it tends to be very risky to create revenue. And that's the reason why most people don't get into business, because it's extremely risky. And that's why the so-called procrastination happens. There is a reason for the procrastination. I mean, you might be working in a direction that might be destructive. So that's one model that you could do. It's high risk. I'm not saying it doesn't work. It works, but it takes a lot of time, because remember, you're working, generating money, pumping it back. Working, generating, pumping it back. And you can do this for any length of time. I mean, this guy, 17 years. It took him 17 years. Okay. Now, he didn't reach that revenue size after 17 years, but he was stuck in that business for 17 years. Maybe he reached at 8, 10 years, 12 years, something like that. So, or you could just go and buy this company in a couple of months' time, assuming you find the right business, assuming you have structured the purchase price right, assuming you have a bank. In theory, you can buy this business in a couple of months. So, to identify the right business, you want a business model where you can create massive amounts of wealth. And obviously, option one is not necessarily going to lead to wealth. Maybe you will have a business, but not necessarily creating wealth. Or it's unlikely it would happen. It can happen, can certainly happen. People have done it, but the risks is high. So we want low risk and high reward. And it's much less risky to buy a company than to create one from scratch. So if you want to get into business, might as well find a business that you can buy and profit from day one. And all you got to make sure is that the revenue stays intact, the profit stays intact, and you are able to pay the debt and you keep the business as it was. So that's another science altogether of how to keep the revenues once you have acquired the business. But it's much better to acquire and to buy revenue, because essentially you're buying sales. Somebody else worked to create these goods and services, and now they are in a position where they're making money, they are crushing the market, and they're in a very stable position, and they have a relationship with their clients, and they have recurring clients that are paying them money. And you have the opportunity where you can go and buy these businesses. So how many businesses are there that you can buy? The bigger the industry in your region, the more the volume of businesses. For example, in UAE, where I'm positioned, my company's position has 5,000 businesses in healthcare. Approximately 5,000, a little more than that. And some of my clients in United States of America, they tell me that they have 40,000 businesses. I mean, imagine 40,000 businesses that you can buy. I mean, you need 10 to 15 to make a serious amount of money. assuming they stay profitable. But you need only a few good ones, and you can pick the best ones, and you have it. And that's where you are positioned, is a level above making sales. You could be making sales and you could be doing marketing and chasing $500 deals, making 500,000 here, this, that. Or you could just buy like 100 sales at a time. That revenue of a company that you're buying, those are essentially sales of thousands of clients. And you are just going and just buying that position that seller has put himself into, where he's making all of this money. So that is positioning in terms of the business model. You could create revenue from scratch, or you could buy revenue. But you need revenue. When you have a business, profit comes from revenue, and you need revenue. There are two ways of securing revenue. You can either create it from scratch, or you could buy it using debt. And you're not paying the debt. The company is going to pay the debt, because you may not have enough income to pay the debt, but the company has income, and you would only buy a company which does have an income, a stable income, and you're going to verify that it's there and it's going to continue. So that's, in essence, the business model. You cannot create wealth in every type of business model. It's unlikely. There are some business models where it is more likely to create wealth. There are some business models where it is less likely. It can happen. It has happened. People have done it, creating revenue and building wealth, but it tends to be a little more risky. Buying revenue, it's a little more straightforward and less risky comparatively. So that's our position, is we are creating a business model we are positioning ourselves with the business model to buy companies, not creating anything from scratch, but creating a company to buy other companies that are profiting. And that's our strategy in terms of the business model. And that's the layer 3 of the positioning. The layer 4 is going to be the type of people that you bring on board, because right now it's just you. You have just in your mind decided it's going to be this industry, this region, and this business model. And now you got to build the team. So we're going to talk about what is the purpose of this team, what are the bases on which you bring people on board. And typically so we're going to talk about that in the next video. And once you have identified the business model, you got to create a vision of the company. You know what you're going to do. You have the strategy established, buying businesses. How many businesses? What kind of businesses? By when? Over what time frame? What is the strategy? What are the challenges? What is the data? We can't just make things up in our head. We got to go and do some market study, gather data, put it in a presentation, and create a plan, a vision, a strategy, a deck that you could use to share this with people around, not around you, but people in the marketplace, people in the corporate world, who you can bring on and use their mental faculties to create more power. And we're going to talk about that in the next video, which is the layer 4, building your team and associating with the right people and bringing them on. So I'll talk to you soon. If you're new to this channel, hit that subscribe button, and I'll talk to you soon.